we are bragging about. The governor has told me that he's going to construct so many roads in our west. The first one is the entrance from Medellin houses to our area, which is the Ora houses and the Yule houses. And from the Rekme through Ozala, through Humura, Eme houses to Afuze to Auchi. The other one, the road is like a catapult. The other one is from the Sebi Rekme through Ozala, Humura, Sabogida Ora, Old, Ojavun, straight to. So the governor has even approved the construction. It's not even rehabilitation, full construction, because those roads are already expired. After that, the other road we are going to also look at is from Uzeba to Uruwe. That this is very, very bad. So we have to. The governor has said that we are going to asphalt that road to Uruwe. Second phase will not proceed from Uruwe, Iki to Otuo. The governor is very, very, very certain that those roads will be done. Another road that the governor has said he will also do is the road from Aviosi, Ibule, Akohumu Road.
Welcome to today's Explainer. Right now, we're diving into a really fascinating piece by Lawson Akibe from the Center for Nigeria Progress. We're looking at the separation of powers, or maybe the lack thereof, and a pretty intense constitutional controversy unfolding in Edo State. Let's just jump right in. We're going to explore exactly how state-level governance is functioning, or, as the author argues, misfunctioning, by looking at a highly revealing dynamic between the executive and legislative branches.
To kick things off, the author points us to a recent viral video. It features the current Edo State House of Assembly Speaker, the Right Honorable Blessing Agbabaku. In this clip, the speaker is super enthusiastic. He's standing in front of his constituents, listing off this grand roll call of road projects, roads stretching from Ayerki Pen to Osla, Sabangida Ora to Uzeba, and all the way down to Otuo. Now, if you live in those areas, this sounds like absolutely fantastic news for local infrastructure, right? But listen closely to the exact phrasing the speaker uses here. He says things like, "The governor has told me," and "the governor has even approved." The article highlights how this specific phrasing is, well, a bit odd. It makes the speaker sound way less like the head of an independent, co-equal branch of government and a whole lot more like a civil servant just relaying directives straight from the executive. He's basically presenting these massive projects as decisions that have already been totally finalized by the governor alone. Which leads the author to pose a brilliant rhetorical question about this whole grand announcement of multi-billion naira infrastructure projects. Think about it. If the head of the legislative branch is simply announcing what the governor has already approved and promised to do, what absolutely crucial step in the democratic process is being completely bypassed here? The answer, according to the source, is budgetary appropriation. There is literally zero mention of the legislature's statutory role in actually scrutinizing, debating, or passing an appropriation act for any of these projects. No talk of supplementary budgets, no mention of committee oversight, no legislative authorization at all. The head of the very arm of government responsible for controlling the state's purse didn't even mention the purse strings?
Section 1. The Constitutional Inversion. To really grasp the author's critique here, we have to look at how this system is legally engineered to operate. The author anchors his whole argument in the 1999 Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, specifically Sections 120 and 121. These sections lay down a crystal-clear rule. Not a single dime can be withdrawn from the Consolidated Revenue Fund of the state without explicit legislative approval. Period. You simply cannot have expenditure without an appropriation law enacted by the House of Assembly. It is the absolute bedrock of how government finances are supposed to work.
And this brings us right to the fundamental principle of the separation of powers. The whole dynamic is supposed to be the executive proposes and the legislature disposes. Meaning, sure, it's the governor's job to present the estimates of revenue and expenditure to the Assembly, but it is solely the Parliament, the House of Assembly, that actually authorizes the spending. The executive branch can't just wake up and decide to spend money on a road without the legislature first debating it and writing it into law.
So, the crucial takeaway here is that by presenting executive decisions to the public as a finished reality, before any legislative hearings have even happened, the entire system gets flipped on its head. The author uses a really powerful metaphor for this. The supervisor has become the messenger. He argues that the executive branch in Edo State is just unilaterally awarding projects, while the head of the legislature passively broadcasts them to the public as a done deal. Section 2. Unilateral Governance. The Ikpoba Hill Flyover. Now you might be wondering, was this viral clip just an isolated slip of the tongue? The article claims it wasn't. It argues this is actually a reflection of a much broader culture. To prove it, the author points to the flagship Ikpoba Hill, also known as Ramat Park Flyover Project. According to the article, capital expenditures of this massive financial scale are being announced and flagged off directly by the executive, sometimes when the House of Assembly isn't even sitting. The source notes there was zero public record of prior legislative debate or authorization before these commitments were rolled out. On top of that, the author alleges this specific project even breached the Environmental Impact Assessment Act, claiming an impact assessment was never even produced. The author breaks down exactly how this process has been totally distorted. Step 1. The executive unilaterally rolls out projects and commits the funds. Step 2. The House of Assembly is brought in after the fact, if they're brought in at all. And Step 3. Because the money is already committed, the constitutional function of the legislature is effectively reduced to a rubber stamp. The author argues that this turns budget defense hearings into nothing more than political theater, basically just retroactively legalizing spending that has already taken place. Section 3. A lesson from the Second Republic. To show us how this system is actually supposed to function and prove that it definitely has worked properly in the past, the author gives us a fascinating historical contrast from the old Bendel state during Nigeria's Second Republic. Let's step back in time for a second. We're introduced to two key historical figures, Governor Professor Ambrose Ali and the Speaker of the House of Assembly, the Right Honorable Benson Alagbe. Unlike today's dynamic, Speaker Alagbe deeply understood his mandate as the leader of a co-equal arm of government. Governor Ali didn't just unilaterally announce projects. He submitted his development plans to the House. The lawmakers then vigorously and independently scrutinized and debated those plans. Oversight wasn't seen as hostility. It was literally their sworn duty. The article gives a great specific example of this in action, the Bendel State Housing Project. At the time, the state government actually rejected a housing project proposed by the federal government and decided to build its own state alternative. But here's the kicker. The Alagbe-led House didn't just rubber stamp the governor's new plan. Instead, they intentionally caused long delays to meticulously investigate the financial efficacy of this massive project. They absolutely did their due diligence. The legislative scrutiny was so intense and honestly so time-consuming that it actually became a running joke. A local comedy program on BTV even satirized the whole process. They joked that all the delays weren't about financial efficacy at all, but just the speaker stubbornly arguing over whether a street inside the new housing estate was going to be named Alagbe Way or Alagbe Close. It's a hilarious anecdote, but it hits the nail on the head. It highlights just how visibly and seriously the legislature was taking its oversight role back then. But the crucial takeaway here is the final result. Did all this intense legislative scrutiny grind progress to a halt? Absolutely not. The rigorous oversight worked. They successfully safeguarded the public purse while still delivering vital housing estates in Ugbo, Ikpoba Hill, and Bendel estates in Wari. It proves beyond a shadow of a doubt that a legislature can be independent, demanding, and thorough, while still partnering perfectly with the executive to deliver major infrastructure.
Section 4. Why this matters for democracy. So, tying all this together, why does the author believe this shift in modern Edo State is so incredibly dangerous? I mean, why should we care if a speaker sounds a bit too much like a spokesperson for the governor? Well, the article concludes with a pretty stark warning. The author fully acknowledges that infrastructure, like those roads or the flyover, are undeniably vital for the economy. But how that development is funded and authorized matters just as much as the concrete itself. Lawmakers have to stop acting like project managers for the governor, because, as the author brilliantly states, when executive convenience replaces constitutional process, state governance quietly transitions from a constitutional democracy into an executive monarchy. When those checks and balances collapse, the very nature of your democracy changes. It's a really powerful framework for looking at how our local governments operate. So, we'll leave you with this final provocative thought to consider regarding the state of checks and balances in your own area. Take a good look at your local representatives. Are they acting as a fierce, independent check on the executive's power and purse, or have they merely become an executive herald, just broadcasting decisions that have already been made behind closed doors? It's a question well worth asking. Thanks for joining us for today's Explainer, and keep questioning the process.